Welcome to the Sales SOS podcast, where we answer your sales distress calls. I'm your host, Liz Hyman, bringing the rescue boat to your sales challenges. In this ever-changing sales environment, it's easy for leaders to feel adrift. We're here to be the beacon guiding you to success. Each episode, I'm joined by top sales experts and practitioners who have navigated this waters and come out victorious. Together, we'll uncover the insights and strategies that will help you hit your sales targets and grow your business. So if you're ready to turn your sales distress into sales success, you're in the right place. Let's dive into today's topic. Hi, welcome to the Sales SOS podcast. I'm Liz Hyman, and we are here today with your crew, and we are talking about sales issues and things that we can do to help you improve your sales. I'm here with Renee Bigelow, Daryl Prell, and Mike Simmons, your crew today. And we're going to be talking today in this episode about sales math. So there's a lot of talk about, some people think it's 100 calls a day. That's what you got to do. The rest of it doesn't matter. And some people are talking about it doesn't matter how many calls you make. It just matters how good they are. But I think that the four of us are in agreement that there's a certain amount of sales math. Like if you are part of a company where you pick up the phone, you call somebody and you close it every single time, please get on with us and share the magic. Because we're just not seeing that. And so there's a certain amount of math that you need to be able to calculate. And one of the things I hear all of the time from CEOs and founders and investors is we can't calculate. We can't figure out. It's all just a wag. It's just a wild guess. Sorry, it's really a wild ass guess if you want to know the truth. And we just never know what's going to happen. So we have these forecasts, but we could be over, we could be under. It's just, they're really meaningless. So let's talk a little bit about what do we measure when we're measuring sales math? What is sales math? Maybe let's just start with the basics of what is sales math? So when I say that, and I know Mike is just dying to answer this question, so I'm throwing it right to him.
Mike's got the whiteboard. I'm waiting for him to turn around and start going for it.
Mike, go do it. Show us about the stages and the math. Mike's going to start us off.
So the first thing I think, so how many people like math? Does anybody in this group like math? Okay. So we've got, and I like math. We've got and then we've got
it's fine.
Not really. Right. So why don't we like math?
Why don't we like math? Well, because it's hard, I can't even remember the order of operations, let alone how to do, division. And the problem with math, though, is that then you come up with a number and then people want to hold you to it. Accountability sucks with math. That's the issue. And then the last thing is it's subjective, right? It's like, well, those assumptions that your math is based on, they're bullshit.
No, Daryl, that's economics.
Oh, sorry.
That's economics.
There's math involved in economics too. So we'll go, yes, but you're right. You're spot on right.
So think about it.
Renee is a rock star at this stuff. She's going to have a different opinion.
So think about it. We complicate math. We add additional variables. We add, like Daryl was talking about, an order of operations. It's hard. It's hard and it's complicated. So let's simplify it. And let's just say, what is the math that we can use where A plus B equals C? Just simple addition.
Oh, how about A plus B equals approximately C?
A plus B equals?
Approximately.
Yeah. Or A plus B equals C sometimes.
Sometimes.
Yeah, and you can get into that, but the reason why I was talking against approximately is if you're already starting to play with this thing called fuzzy math, then you get yourself into a situation where it's really hard to manage expectations and test assumptions around those expectations. So let's call something. Say that A plus B equals C. And then when we test it in the operating environment, we can determine, does A plus B actually equal C? Do we need to add in another variable? can we reduce a variable? Can we just go A equals C, like you were talking about earlier, which is every time I get on a call, I have a conversation and I close business because I'm amazing, which is not the case, right? So the point that I was trying to make there is, if we can make it really simple, then we can test against it. And if we make it simple and we can test against it, then we can start to make better decisions around it. And a lot of people will struggle with it because they'll look at it and they'll say, I just don't get math. I don't do math. It looks complicated when a bunch of stuff goes up against that board. So that's my perspective. I don't know if that's helpful, or maybe I even overcomplicated it all in that discussion.
What are your thoughts, Renee?
I can add in. I've worked in both extremes, very large enterprise level in major corporations, Fortune 500s, and I've worked at brand new startups. And the math is different. Math is math is math, except you're coming at them from exact opposite ends of the spectrum in those two scenarios. And I think, one is a lot wilder, one is more predictable, right? But the reality is that a whole bunch of people are somewhere in the middle, and that's where things get fuzzy, right? In a large enterprise organization, your math is you have something fairly predictable. You have a lot of data for assumptions. You understand your capacity. You understand your goals. You understand your market and what that growth trajectory is probably going to look like. And you have a lot of data to back up what's happening in the market. At a startup, largely this is what I want to happen, right? This is the goal I have set out for myself, and it's not founded in data. It's this has to happen, right? Like, we've got to pay people, we've made promises to investors, like whatever those things are. So this has to happen, and the way you get to those maths is very different, right? On one end, on the startup end, you've got to put a number out there and you got to find a way to get to it. And largely on the enterprise side, you have to justify why you're building in numbers based on data. So I think when people land in the middle, which is where I spend a lot of my time now, which is like mid-market, right? That's where this gets really fuzzy, because you got a little bit of both happening, right? You've got these growth goals and scaling that you're trying to get to. So you're like, this is the number we need to hit in order for us to meet our overall goal. And then you have a certain amount of data that you're looking at and trying to make those assumptions. Does that help a little bit frame the conversation?
Yeah. Daryl, do you have something to add?
Give me an answer to build off a little bit what Renee said. So I'll drop back a step. So the question was, what is it? So this is not necessarily the right explanation, but I find I'm having this conversation a lot of the time with people who are still figuring out sales math in the marketing discipline, or even in the RevOps discipline. They know how to twiddle the bits in Salesforce.com or HubSpot, but they don't know what sales math is, which is, bad. So sales math is simply in its simplest form, what does the data show you are the activities you need to do, the volume of activities you need to do to physically get a sale. I'm making this really simple. And once you figure that out, then you can use that to start forecasting or modeling to see if you're going to hit your sales targets, like Renee was talking about. So simple math, sales math, very simple, would be if I make 100 phone calls, I'll have 10% connect rate. This is bullshit math, by the way, guys, because this doesn't apply anymore. But you get the idea. 100 phone calls, I'm going to have 10 conversations. Of those 10 conversations, 3 will be qualified opportunities, and then 1 will result in a sale. And if my average selling price is $50,000, then that means if I want to hit a number of $250,000 for my quota, I need to make 5 times 50, 250,000, which means I need to make 500 calls theoretically to get, those 5 deals at $50,000 a piece. And then if I have 4 sales reps and they do the same math, then I'm going to make $1 million in revenue. Does that support our sales projections, et cetera, et cetera? That's the starting point. And to the point that was discussed earlier, you can make some assumptions, because when you're starting out, especially as a beginner, you don't know what the sales math is because you don't have enough volume of activity. So you make just a straw man like I just did. And then to Mike's point, now you're actually going to go track the data and see how does that actually track. The reality is maybe 100 calls results in one qualified opportunity. So I need to make 300 calls to get 3 qualified opportunities to get 1 sale. So then you adjust your model accordingly. But that's sales math. So it's important to marketing because they need to know how much activity to do to bring in, raw or marketing qualified leads, which will convert into sales qualified leads. And it's important to sales because they need to know how much activity they need to do. So when their sales manager is talking to your sales rep and they're saying you're not meeting your numbers, you're not hitting your quota, they're going to look at the sales math to say, well, are you doing enough activity? So that's the importance of it. And the idea is you share the assumptions, you share the conversions with everybody involved in revenues, and that becomes your baseline to talk with one another about, well, did they do enough phone calls? Did they do enough emails? Did they do enough social touches? And then you can get very granular. You can get into how long is the sales cycle or et cetera. What's my renewal? Then you get into all the SaaS metrics and it gets crazy. But how did I do it?
You did great. Let me kind of put a little bit more meat around that. So when I start thinking about sales math, I immediately think about the funnel. So I know you guys are sick of me talking about the funnel, but this is how it works. It's shaped like a funnel for a reason. And it's shaped like a funnel because you have to do a lot more prospecting than closing, right? So there's a basic sales math that somebody decided was a good starting place because it's in almost every single CRM in the same way when you first start out. And that is a 10-to-1 ratio. So for 10 prospecting activities, I get 1 lead, or I get, 1 closed deal. So this may or may not have anything to do with your company, but it's a good place to start. So if I prospect 10 people, and I don't mean just cold calling, but actually research prospecting customers who could potentially be your client, maybe I get to talk to 7 of them. That would be really lucky. And then if I have 7 conversations, maybe 5 of those would be qualified and they would be ready to make a proposal for them. And if 5 of them I create a proposal for, maybe 2 of them will say, yes, that's what I want in this period of time. Let's do it. And if I'm lucky, both of them close, but we all know that even after they say yes, it doesn't necessarily close. So I always assume 2 in closing and 1 in closed. So if that's the basic sales math for the sales part of the funnel, 2 things come out of that. One is if I'm 10 timesing that 1, then when I get up to marketing qualified leads, how much do I need to multiply that? And if I have going up to just touches or interactions on the website or meeting people at conferences, how much do I need to multiply that number? So for that 1, there may be 1,000 interactions out there, which sounds like that's really scary math. And if you don't understand that the math can be that big, then you're not necessarily investing enough in the top of the funnel to get there. Mike, you're smiling. What are you thinking?
I used to do it that way.
How do you do it now? Like I said, that's kind of like the basic standard that comes in your Salesforce or your HubSpot, right?
Yeah. So you asked how I do it now. I focus on 2 numbers when starting to figure out what the math is inside an organization, specifically from a sales perspective, because that's where I'll focus on this stuff. The 2 numbers I care about more than anything else are pipeline created and pipeline developed. That's it. I don't worry about anything beyond that, because everybody has a different set of activity conversion metrics. We're all different. If I'm reaching out directly to somebody, the response is going to be a little bit different than if my son Sean is reaching out to somebody, or somebody new to a sales role is reaching out. But the 2 numbers I care about most are pipeline created, so opportunities, deals, whatever language you want to use that indicates that, hey, I've got a live one here. There might be there's an opportunity for us to potentially do business with each other. And then pipeline develop. How does it move through each of those stages? And in the past, we've talked about those stages. So you can go back and listen to that episode. And heck, you could binge watch all of these episodes and get some amazing stuff. But those are the two numbers that I care about. And what I find is when we start talking too early about all of the other numbers, people get lost.
Yeah.
Things get complicated. People have opinions. Well, at my organization, this is what we use. Inside this CRM, this is what we use. This report that I read about this says this is what we should use. And it takes us away from the objective, which is let's make some freaking money. Like, let's actually develop pipeline up to the point that it turns into a sale. So those are my two numbers. And the only two numbers I care about up until the point that I start to be able to do something with the data and then work that other math backward. So I start with those two numbers. So that's how I do it now to avoid a lot of the complicated stuff in some of the other areas. And some people, there are a lot of people who would disagree with me on this approach. Heck, 3 of them might be on this call. But anyway, so that's how I do it.
So yeah. I'll jump in only briefly, like I'm ever brief, and say, I agree with you, Mike, from a sales point of view. The problem with your approach as a marketer is that, and Renee's going, yeah, is that doesn't tell me anything as far as the outbound activity I need to do to generate pipeline for you to qualify.
Daryl, do your job. As a marketer, do your job. Like I trust that you're going to do your job. Yeah, Renee, and Renee, I trust that you're going to do your job.
I'll add a third critical number to that. Not to get too complicated, but it leads to exactly what Daryl said. If I came into an organization very marketing immature, very sales mature, and that's kind of what you're describing, very sales mature. Like these numbers matter, right? Like we've gotten this down, and we'll figure out the rest. Like we've zeroed in, this matters. And that's very common. There's a lot of middle America and Main Street USA that is marketing immature and has been very sales or channel driven over time, right? And they're trying to figure this out. Number one missing metric that I see is how long is the customer journey and how long is the buyer's journey? So like you split that out into pre and post, right? And so if you don't know how long that is, if you haven't kind of figured out where you start conversations in the buyer's pyramid and kind of assigned a timeline throughout that buyer's pyramid, then you have no idea what that beginning number, what it's going to take to get from that beginning number to where you are with pipeline created, right? And eventually closed. Like Liz said, that closed won, closed lost, whatever. Like how long did it take to get there? You have to have that. And then I always add in, because I'm full stack, there's a lot more opportunity after the first close. So you need to understand that portion too. But understanding that timeline for your industry, your company, your team, your leads, those that's a critical number to me. Daryl, you? Yeah,
I'll just explain to those who are missing some profound power behind what Renee just said was, we often will do these assumptions. Well, what's your typical sales cycle? Okay, my typical sales cycle is 30 days. Once I've qualified. So then on a quarterly basis, I have a brand new hire. If I give them 2 months to ramp up, then they'll be able to hit 1/3 of their quarterly number because they'll have 30 days that last month. Boom. We're good. No problem. Go. But what Renee's saying is, no. That's the actual sales duration, that 30 days.
No, that's only part of the sales duration.
But there's the whole point of we have to actually do the outreach, the marketing to them to actually identify and warm them up and get them exposed to us and willing to take your calls and your outreach because they've seen our brand 42 freaking times and they've downloaded some content and everything else. So that's the whole buyer's journey. So people often will use sales math to do forecasting based on a sales duration when the reality is, to Renee's point, it's not just the sales portion, it's the whole buyer's journey. And by the way, we won't even get to the buyer's journey because the buyer's journey continues once they become a customer, and which is a whole different.
All the way.
Yeah.
Okay, so hang on one second.
How we go from a funnel to a flywheel, though.
That's right. Oh, Renee, you got to do that with us in a little bit. Okay, so hang on just a second, because if you are not with us on video and you're actually listening to this as a podcast, Mike has just pulled out the whiteboard and has started writing. And I'm going to go to him in just a second, but I want to go back before we do that to what Daryl just said. And typically when I go into a company, they will tell me our sales cycle is 3 months. And after working with them for a little while,
that comment, sorry. You never know their sales cycle. That's why she's laughing, just so you know. They'll just bullshit and say it's 3 months.
Well, and it's 3 months from the time I write a proposal. 3
months to
the time that I start writing a proposal until it closes. But the sales cycle, forget the marketing cycle, forget the entire customer journey. That sales cycle, that having that first conversation, that having that first reaching out to a customer you already have about a proposal, something that you want to propose to them, that top of the funnel generally doesn't get measured. And so you don't know you're in trouble until way down the sales cycle. And so instead of saying, hey, I'm looking at, I'm looking at the entire sales cycle and it's 9 months. So we better make sure 9 months from now, we're going to hit our numbers, which means we need to look at the top of the funnel, not the top of the marketing funnel, but the top of the sales funnel, in order to figure out whether we're going to hit our number in 9 months or 12 months or 18 months, instead of just looking at the bottom of the funnel, which is the 3 months. And if you really want to know what's going to happen, then you've got to look at the top of the funnel also. And so that's why, Mike, I start having sales leaders look at all of these numbers so they can understand. I had a client one time who said, well, the top of the funnel is full, so we don't need to get any more leads until all that stuff is closed. So that's the other piece of looking at this, is the stuff that's in the funnel that you're counting legitimate. Does it have the momentum that Mike was talking about, where you're actually moving it forward in the sales process? Because just because your funnel is full doesn't mean anything is going to close. So, Mike, I pass it to you from there.
All right, so I'm going to ask a couple of questions.
Sure.
If, Renee, you could only report on 2 numbers from a marketing performance perspective in this kind of green area that you and Daryl were discussing. So this is the Liz started talking about this red area that I added, which is the top of the funnel. But in this period here, where someone becomes, maybe it starts where we know who they are. What are 2 numbers that you would track in here? If you could only track 2, that would be an indicator of health or performance. And Renee, you first, and then I'll go to Daryl.
Yeah.
Let Daryl go first, because I'm not 100% sure following
I'll tell
what
you
numbers.
Area is.
2 numbers. And Renee's going to have probably 2 different numbers. We marketers, we all measure different things.
This is why working with marketers is so hard, and why you've got to find experts like Daryl or Renee who know their stuff.
So for me, and I'll give you the answer and then I'll explain why. For me, I want to know conversion rate by channel. Okay. And I want to know average deal size or sales price by channel.
Say that again. Conversion rate by channel.
Average deal size by channel. So while he's writing that down, let me explain. I want to know, in other words, what's my conversion rate? Again, I'll use very simple math. My pay per click converts at 1%. All right. So if I'm averaging a spend of $100,000 a month, I now know it's to do whatever volume of pay per click, it's got a 1% conversion rate. Then I don't want to know what the average deal size is. Well, I know that the pay per click deal size is $10,000. So now I know that at $100,000 spend, I'm going to have, I know only 1% of that will actually convert and do a deal. And it's only going to be $10,000. So now I can start to assess my spend, and I can also forecast how much money I need to additionally spend, assuming a linear conversion rate to meet the revenue goals. So, and the second part there is that we may determine marketers get hit by the fact that they want us to measure everything, and everybody has an opinion, right? So we need to say, well, listen, I spent $50,000 on trade shows, but the average deal size is $50,000 versus pay-per-click. The average deal size is $10,000, right? So I can start to see my marketing math I need to do for my spend, my investment to feed.
And so, Daryl, I'm going to stop you there only because that's what I want to do in episode 4.
Okay,
I want to really dig into that because it's
that I care about.
I'll add, so I'll back it up just a teeny bit to say, if you're talking about from, we've collected them into our database, essentially, right? So they're now just in our database all the way to, I think that's where sales conversation starts, is the blue area. Is that right? Okay, so we've collected their name into our database all the way to a sales conversation starts. The two I probably want to know are, what is the conversion rate? How many did it take to get there, right? Essentially, if I'm just really high level. And the second would be, how many touches did it take to get there?
Cool. That's good. I like that one. Because one of the things you got to think about
and that would also be time, like touches.
Touches equals time, which goes back to what, of course, myself and our lovely host here, was just talking about, the whole duration of time. And actually, Renee brought that up too. Time is huge.
Okay, Mike, walk us through it.
Educate us, doctor.
So, Liz, you had said something before. You said top of funnel. What was it that you were describing? What's that stage? So on the unknown side of things, in that red area, what's a number? And there are no wrong answers. What's a number that you think is important in this area to help understand what needs to happen here to lead into here to lead into here? So on that top of funnel, is there anything that comes to mind that you want to know?
Just to clarify, you're talking about awareness.
Because
this is before they hit our database.
Before they hit the database.
Awareness. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Do you want to answer? I'll tell you, I would say reach and frequency. Right.
Say that again.
Your reach in your market would be your top thing. How much have you reached, and what's the frequency that you've done it? I mean, that is, I will say this before somebody accuses me of being focused on ads, because that is an ad formula, like reach and frequency, but that should apply more than across ads, right? Like your formats are more than advertising. So
some people would be measuring how much activity is there on the website, how many pages do they go to, how long do they stay there. So that might be another thing that you measure if you do a lot of activity on your website. Just depends on how you do your top of the funnel work.
Yeah, I would say that falls into like your reach and frequency, right? Like you need to figure out all the different touch points of how you're reaching out, how you're reaching people. What's that total universe look like? How many times are you touching them? Are they coming to you? Right. And then what does it take to do that to get them to enter your database?
Right. So thank you. What I attempted to do while we were talking is visualize the stages that folks go through. And to Liz's point, this typically will look like a funnel, because not everybody from stage 1 hits the website, sees some of the other things, touches, impressions, any of that other kind of stuff. Not everyone who does that stuff will move into the next piece, which they convert into someone who's known. And not everybody who is known will convert into somebody that we're actually having a sales conversation with. And not everybody who we have a sales conversation will actually develop as they go through. The reason I asked for 2 numbers as we're going through this is because it gets people focused on really works towards simplifying something. A single set of numbers that we can actually start to build a plan on influencing. So just with this discussion, though, we went from A plus B equals C to A plus B plus C times D divided by whatever and equals stuff. And this is why this conversation is so important to have inside the business. It's so important to have across multiple functions inside the business. And it's very important to not get so beholden to your specific numbers and all of the cool things you can measure, because before you know it, you will create this rat's nest of stuff that looks like spaghetti rather than connected information that can help you move from point A to B. And I understand it's more complex than that. But even here, we just talked about marketing cycle length from a time, sales cycle length from a time, pipeline created, pipeline developed, conversion rate, touch points, reach, frequency. Those are all variables that we're adding in here. And every time you add a new variable, you create complexity. But you can simplify this by breaking it down into either this A portion or phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Don't try to cover all of it at once. And that's hopefully what you see when you take a look at the visualized version of this conversation. Hopefully that was helpful. You gave me enough time. Nobody kicked me out, so it must have been somewhat helpful, or at least you guys are too nice to me.
I will add, if you want to label them, some general terms that are fairly ubiquitous are awareness, consideration, decision. Right? So awareness, consideration, and decision making. Right? That those are sort of the phases that you would be mapping when you do map out your buyer's journey.
So what's really interesting about that is the buyer journey, right? That's what the buyer does. And while our sales funnel looks like this, their journey actually looks kind of the opposite way, because they're starting to figure out, what do I need to go find? How do I go about it? So
Liz, I actually always describe, if you just for workshop purposes, for people to understand this, that you start with the buyer's pyramid and then flip that down into a funnel. And then you figure out how to turn that into a flywheel.
And this flywheel, we're going to talk about in a little bit in one of our next episodes, because it's a really important part of this math. So stick with us. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. I just want to wrap up this sales math thing that we're talking about that is so unclear and so difficult for people to understand. Mike's point is, measure what matters. Just because you can measure it doesn't mean you should, is one of the common sayings that we have in this world of math. The second thing is, figure out, as you're doing this, what are the numbers that matter to you as you're learning. So pick some numbers to measure. Start somewhere, pick something to measure, and then watch that and figure out, are those numbers telling you enough, or do you need something else in addition or something else instead? But figure out your math. And for me, while I love math, Mike's way of doing it, my way of sort of looking at the funnel help CEOs start to look at, what does this actually look like? How does this flow actually go? And so while you may not focus on all of those, because you can't focus on everything, being able to see the full set of numbers sometimes gives you a better understanding of what's going on. So 2 different ways to approach it. But in any case, do the math, learn the math, revise the math until it really helps you figure out how to predict what's going to happen. And what I would say, if you need help with that, all of us are willing to have a conversation with you. So you can find all of us on LinkedIn and reach out and say, hey, I need some help doing this. And we'd love to help you.
Because of course we don't like talking about this.
No.
No. All right. Well, that wraps up our first episode of Sales Math. Thanks for joining us.
And that's a wrap of this episode of the Sales SOS podcast. A huge thank you to our experts for throwing us a lifeline with their insights. We hope today's episode has equipped you to navigate the sales seas with confidence. Never miss an episode. Subscribe to the Sales SOS podcast on your favorite platform. If you have questions, comments, or topics you'd like us to explore, join us live on LinkedIn every second Friday, or share your questions on YouTube or LinkedIn. Until next time, keep sailing towards those sales goals. I'm Liz Hyman, your captain here at the Sales SOS podcast, saying smooth sailing and successful selling.